If you visited Galveston in 1890 and walked through Calvary Catholic Cemetery, you might have noticed something unusual. A Gothic-style mausoleum that looked like it belonged in Rome, not Texas. Above its entrance, carved in stone, were the words, Società Italiana di Mutuo Soccorso, Italian Mutual Benevolent Society. This was the Italian vault, and it tells a different immigration story. One of fishermen and stonecutters, of people who came not for farmland, but for the sea and the city. In the late 1800s, southern Italy and Sicily were experiencing a crisis. The newly unified Italian nation had brought political changes, but little economic improvement. In fact, for many poor Southerners, things got worse. Southern Italy and Sicily were desperately poor. Most people were landless peasants working for wealthy landlords. Wages were barely enough to survive. With limited land and resources, too many people competed for too few opportunities. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions from Mount Vesuvius and Mount Etna, and crop failures made life even more precarious. If you weren't born into a wealthy family, your future was essentially predetermined. You'd be a peasant farmer or laborer, just like your father and grandfather. Galveston, Texas became a great destination for immigrating Italians for a few reasons. For Sicilian fishermen, the Gulf of Mexico offered incredible opportunity. The waters teemed with shrimp, oysters, and fish. Better yet, unlike in Sicily where the best fishing grounds were controlled by wealthy families, the Gulf was open to anyone with a boat and the skill to use it. Galveston was a booming port city that needed laborers to load and unload ships, build structures, and work in the growing service economy. As with other immigrant groups, chain migration was crucial. A few Italians would arrive, establish themselves, and then write home encouraging family and friends to join them. Italian immigration to Galveston didn't follow one single pattern, like the organized German Adelsverein or the Galveston movement. Instead, it was more individual and family-based. Many Italian immigrants arrived with some resources, perhaps not wealthy, but not destitute either. Sicilian fishermen, for instance, often had marketable skills and experience with the sea. Some had enough money to buy or lease fishing boats once they arrived. Unlike the agricultural immigrants who quickly moved inland, many Italians stayed in Galveston or moved to nearby coastal areas like Dickinson, where they could pursue fishing and maritime trades. This made their experience distinctly urban compared to the rural German, Czech, and Polish settlers. Built in 1888, the Italian vault in Calvary Cemetery stands as perhaps the most visible symbol of Italian community organization in Galveston. Here's what made it remarkable. The Società Italiana di Mutuo Soccorso, Italian Mutual Benevolent Society, constructed this elaborate mausoleum to serve as temporary burial space for community members. Why was this necessary? Imagine you're an Italian immigrant who dies suddenly. Your family is poor. They don't have money for a proper burial plot or headstone. In the old world, you might have been buried in a pauper's grave, or worse, your body might have been disposed of without dignity. The Italian vault ensured that no Italian in Galveston would suffer that fate. When a community member died, they could be placed in the vault, a dignified, beautiful resting place, until the family could afford a permanent plot or could arrange to send the body back to Italy. The vault was a physical statement. We take care of our own. Every person deserves dignity, even in death. This kind of mutual aid organization was typical of Italian immigrant communities. The Società Italiana didn't just handle burials. It provided small loans to members starting businesses, helped new arrivals find housing and work, organized social events and festivals, maintained Italian language and cultural traditions, negotiated collectively for better wages and working conditions. While some Italians worked the sea, Others shaped Galveston's physical appearance through skilled craftsmanship. Nicholas Clayton was the premier architect of 19th century Galveston. He designed many of the city's most beautiful buildings in the ornate Victorian style popular at the time. But Clayton's elaborate designs required skilled craftsmen, people who could cut stone precisely, lay ornate brickwork, and create the decorative details that made these buildings special. Many of these craftsmen were Italian immigrants. The Bishop's Palace, also called the Gresham House, is the crown jewel of Galveston architecture. Built between 1887 and 1893, it features intricate stone carving, elaborate ironwork, complex masonry requiring precise cutting and fitting of stone, decorative elements that required old-world skills. Italian stonemasons and craftsmen were essential to creating this masterpiece. They brought techniques passed down through generations in Italy, where stoneworking was an ancient and honored trade. But it wasn't just grand mansions. Italian craftsmen worked on commercial buildings along the Strand, churches and religious structures, residences for Galveston's growing merchant class, infrastructure like seawalls and wharves. Their craftsmanship is still visible today. Anytime you see elaborate stonework or decorative masonry in historic Galveston, there's a good chance Italian hands shaped it. Perhaps the most distinctive Italian contribution to Galveston was in the fishing industry. Sicilian immigrants in particular brought generations of seafaring knowledge to the Gulf Coast. They introduced or improved net-making techniques. Sicilians were experts at crafting the large nets needed for commercial fishing. Boat designs. They adapted their Mediterranean fishing boats for Gulf conditions. Preservation methods. Italian knowledge of salting and preserving fish helped create markets for Gulf seafood far inland. Oyster harvesting. Italian fishermen became major players in the Gulf's lucrative oyster industry. By the early 1900s, Italian families dominated certain sectors of Galveston's fishing industry. You'd see Italian names on boats, Italian being spoken on the docks, and Italian families running seafood wholesale businesses. This wasn't without tension. Established fishermen sometimes resented the hard-working Italian newcomers. There were disputes over fishing territories, accusations that Italians were willing to work for less money, driving down wages, and general ethnic prejudice. But the Italians persevered, and their influence on Gulf Coast fishing culture became permanent. Italian immigrants in Galveston and other Texas cities faced a particular challenge. In the heavily segregated South, where exactly did they fit? Italians were Catholic in a predominantly Protestant region. They spoke a foreign language. They had darker complexions than Northern Europeans, and some racist Southerners didn't consider them fully white. Yet they clearly weren't black or Mexican either. This ambiguous racial status created opportunities and problems. The problems. Italian children sometimes faced discrimination in schools. Intermarriage with Anglo families was often opposed. Italian workers were sometimes exploited, with employers assuming they'd accept lower wages. In some places, Italians faced "No Italians Need Apply" signs, similar to those targeting Irish immigrants. The opportunities. Because they weren't clearly defined as non-white, Italians had more opportunities than Mexican or Black Texans. They could own property, vote, and eventually participate in civic life. Their skilled trades and business ownership gave them economic leverage. Through Catholic Church connections, they integrated into existing religious communities. Over time, especially by the second and third generations, Italian Texans were increasingly accepted as simply white Americans. The process wasn't always smooth, but it happened faster than for some other immigrant groups. If you've ever eaten Italian food in Texas, and you almost certainly have, you've experienced the lasting impact of Italian immigration. Italian immigrants didn't just make food for themselves, they introduced Italian cuisine to their new neighbors. In cities with Italian communities, you'd find bakeries selling fresh bread, pastries, and eventually pizza. Grocery stores specializing in Italian imports like olive oil, pasta, and cheeses. Restaurants serving Americanized versions of Italian classics. Street vendors selling Italian ice and other treats. Italian food became popular because it was delicious, relatively inexpensive, and familiar enough, based on simple ingredients like tomatoes, cheese, and bread, to appeal to American palates. By the mid-20th century, Italian restaurants were fixtures in every Texas city. Spaghetti and meatballs, pizza, lasagna, foods that seemed exotic in 1890 became everyday American meals by 1950. And it all started with immigrant families sharing their traditional recipes with their new neighbors. The Italian immigration story doesn't have the dramatic elements of the Czech tragedy or the organized scope of the Galveston movement. There's no single founding moment like the Poles' Christmas Eve Mass under the live oak. Instead, the Italian legacy in Texas is quieter but pervasive. It's in the beautiful buildings whose stonework still stands after more than a century, the fishing techniques still used by Gulf Coast commercial fishermen, the Italian festivals held in Texas cities every year, the restaurants and bakeries bearing Italian names, the Italian vault standing sentinel in Galveston Cemetery, still a monument to the idea that community members care for each other. Italian immigrants proved that you didn't have to settle farmland or create whole new towns to make a lasting impact. Sometimes, building a city's infrastructure, feeding its people, and maintaining your cultural traditions while embracing your new home is contribution enough. Today, Texas has vibrant Italian-American communities, particularly in its major cities. Most Italian Texans are third, fourth, or fifth generation now, fully American, yet still maintaining connections to their Italian heritage through food, festivals, family stories, and occasionally, a last name ending in a vowel. And in Galveston, the Italian vault still stands, a Gothic monument on the Gulf Coast, reminding visitors that Texas's diversity was built not just by one group, but by many, each adding their own thread to the complex tapestry of the Lone Star State. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to continue this journey through the Golden Door and find out how other groups immigrated to Texas through Galveston. Let me know in the comments what you think so far, and what other parts of history would you like to see covered. Until next time, stay curious.